My name's Tom Hickey. I'm a member of the SWP, but I'm also a member of the University and Colleges Union and a member of the British Committee for the Universities of Palestine. And I'm very pleased to see so many people here at this meeting this afternoon, because every year we do indeed have meetings about Palestine and about the importance of Palestine solidarity with the struggle of the Palestinians. And that movement over the past period has been growing strongly. And hopefully, when my colleague Samia Botmeh from the West Bank, from Ramallah, when she joins us by Skype, she will be telling us about the importance of the campaign of solidarity that's been mounted across the world, not just here in Britain or in Europe, but across the world, of solidarity with the Palestinians in the form of the boycott, disinvestment and sanctions movement, a campaign that's been growing enormously over the past period. We do that every year, but this year we have to do something else on top of that. Because for the last 2 years at least, possibly longer, what we've been facing is an organized backlash against that campaign, organized out of Tel Aviv, organized by the Israeli state, and a state that now recognizes, have come to recognize, that the isolation of Israel, the characterization of that state as a colonial settler state with an organized apartheid system to maintain the rule of one ethnicity over another, and ultimately to expel, not through force of arms, but through the extirpation of a culture, the remaining Palestinians from Palestine. They recognize that the BDS movement, the movement for boycott, disinvestment and sanctions, is now a greater strategic threat to them. And this is not me speaking, but this is the Israeli defense minister speaking, than the possibility of Iran developing a nuclear weapon. They recognize the existential threat of Israel being treated in the way that South Africa was treated for years, and which ultimately brought the apartheid regime in South Africa to its knees. Part of that is what Jonathan Rosenhead, my colleague here, who is also a member of the British Committee for the Universities in Palestine. Jonathan is also a professor at the London School of Economics and a member of the campaign called Jewish Voices for Peace and for Free Speech on Israel. Jonathan will be telling you about the campaign that's being launched to try and silence these voices on campuses up and down Britain, one after another, seeking to ban meetings in a response to the intervention of Joe Johnson, the Minister for Higher Education, who wrote to Universities UK this year, instructing them, as if he had the power to so instruct them, but attempting to instruct them, that they had to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which conflates criticism of Israel with racist anti-Semitism. That's what it does in its guidelines. So inviting them, for instance, to be very wary of allowing the annual event, the Israeli Apartheid Week events, to take place, in which the universities might be held responsible for hosting racist anti-Semitic meetings. In other words, attempting to silence the voice of Palestine and the voice of Palestine solidarity. And that's really what this meeting is about today. Jonathan will explain what's been going on in the UK and internationally, across Europe as well. Samia will tell us about the importance of this movement, the BDS movement, in Palestine itself, and will report to us on the situation in Palestine. And then at the end of the meeting, what I want to do is talk to you about what it is that we need to do now in the face of this attempt to close down the voice of the liberation struggle. But first of all, let me introduce you, therefore, to Professor Jonathan Rosenhead, who is going to speak to you about this campaign.
Thank you. I'm going to start with three exhibits, three books. The first book is called On Anti-Semitism. It's just been published earlier this year by the Jewish Voice of Peace in the United States. It has a foreword by Judith Butler. It is eminently thoughtful and reflective, and significantly most of the authors are Jewish. Some are Christian, some are Muslim. But it is a in-depth analysis of what the significance of anti-Semitism and of why there appears to be so much concern about it right now. My second exhibit is of a different kind. It's called The Left's Jewish Problem: Jeremy Corbyn, Israel and Anti-Semitism. And as you probably can't see, it has a picture of Jeremy Corbyn, Star of David, lots of blood splatters around the place concerned with Gaza. And it is a thoroughly shoddy piece of work which was rushed out. He works for the Security Trust, which looks after the security of synagogues and Jewish schools and so on. And it was rushed out for the Labour Party conference last September. Sorry, I think I need to wipe my hands, but anyhow, third book. Interestingly, I just came across this. I've taken it out of the library. It's called Jews, Labour and the Left, 1918 to 1948, edited by Christine Collette and Stephen Bird. 1918 to 1948 was a period of maximum anti-Semitism in this country. Remember, this covers the whole period of Mosley, and there was indeed continuing anti-Semitism after the Second World War. Anti-Semitism does not feature in the index. It's not even mentioned. It's not an issue on the left. I joined the Labour Party in, well, I left it as well from time to time. I joined it in 1961. I rejoined it 2 years ago, but I was in and out more than that. In all those decades when I was in it, I never encountered a single anti-Semitic incident. And most of my Jewish friends in the Labour Party are in the same situation. I have encountered anti-Semitism elsewhere, twice, that I've noticed. I'm sure some people may have had anti-Semitic thoughts, but I don't have access to those. So this is not, it is an issue. The horror of the Holocaust is such we should all be aware of it and monitor it, and when it becomes overt, we should do something about it. But it is not the big social and political problem of our day, but you wouldn't have thought so to read the headlines. So since February last year, there has been an extraordinary eruption of concern about anti-Semitism. Meanwhile, Islamophobia proceeds many times bigger, and nobody is saying we need a definition of Islamophobia, although in fact, Islamophobia is much less well understood than anti-Semitism. There was a clear understanding of anti-Semitism before people started to define it. They started to define it in order to change the understood meaning, which was hatred of Jews as Jews. So, we are in a period of maximum social turbulence, and it's not just the extraordinary excitement of the last few weeks or the last month since the election and during the election. There has been turbulence for some time with the Brexit vote, and the extraordinary eruption of fake news, claims of anti-Semitism, is all part, I think, of the situation. The mutiny against Jeremy Corbyn by the majority of his supposed supporters, claiming that the membership had no right to define what the party was. They, as the Parliamentary Labour Party, ought to have the right to decide that enough was enough and left was too left. And it turns out that the weapon of choice to attack Corbyn with was anti-Semitism. It was a coalition of people who were either on the Blairite left, right, what am I thinking about? Blairite right, and supporters of Israel. Now, of course, in many cases they were the same people, so they could conspire with themselves. But it was an extremely effective alliance, and it began to define an issue which wasn't there on the ground, but became so in the headlines. And it was in that environment. Why they wanted it, of course, because the Blairites on the right wanted nothing to do with Corbyn transforming the Labour Party, and the Israel lobby had no wish to see the first leader of a major parliamentary political party in Europe who clearly aligned with the Palestinian cause. So they were both agreed on what should be done, but for slightly different reasons. And I am sorry to say that Jeremy Corbyn having had so many other battles to fight against these people, has not chosen to defend resolutely against the anti-Semitism campaign. He's tended to roll with the punches rather than to oppose it. But one can only imagine how difficult his recent period has been. Taking advantage of the situation, in December, the British government, as Thomas mentioned, adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, which was previously called the EUMC. Don't worry about what the initials stand for. Definition that people have been trying to sell around Europe and around the world since 2004. But the May government adopted it, and it was not opposed. Indeed, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party immediately said, we support the adoption of this as government policy. We have subsequently been trying to find out what this means because the structure of the definition is a bit peculiar. I have a copy here. It's a very short statement, almost meaningless, followed by a long interpretation. The short statement is, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Now, the crucial vagueness in that definition is, it is a certain perception of Jews. They don't say what it is. And they say it may be expressed as hatred, which means of Jews, but means it may be expressed in other ways. And that is to leave the vagueness for the interpretation, which says, here are 11 things that are prima facie anti-Semitic, and 7 of those focus on Israel. So it is an attempt to extend the previously well-understood meaning of anti-Semitism to cover criticism of Israel. And it's been a remarkably successful maneuver so far. By February, as Thomas said, Joe Johnson, the Minister for Higher Education, had circulated effectively via Universities UK the definition to all universities, saying you need to pay attention to this and look out for anti-Semitism, particularly during Israeli apartheid, which takes place in February, the end of February. Meanwhile, Sajid Javid had sent the same thing out to all local authorities, saying that, obviously thinking about hiring of rooms, etc., that they should look out for any organizations that wish to carry out anti-Semitic hate fests in their premises. That was not his exact words. It was written by civil servants, but you know what I mean. All that did not just happen. There is in this country an Israel lobby. We all know about the one in America, but it's only recently been emerging how strong it is here. It used to work behind the scenes, but flushed out as it has been by the successful campaign for boycott, divestment and sanctions, it has started to come out from behind the scenes and fight in the streets, and in the universities and in the town halls. And just some of the organizations of the Israel lobby are, we all know about the Jewish labor movement, I imagine, which has penetrated and infiltrated the Labour Party higher levels very effectively. There's Labour Friends of Israel, which does what it says on the tin. There's the Jewish Human Rights Watch. There's UK Lawyers for Israel. There's the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. There's BICOM, and so on and so on. Those of you who saw the Al Jazeera program, a series of programs called The Lobby, which was undercover reporting among these organizations, will have seen several more organizations being formed with support from the Israeli embassy, with money from the Israeli embassy, with money from AIPAC in the United States. So all of this is happening. There is a tremendous mismatch of resources with amazing amount of paid employment and office space and people working for the Israeli cause over here in London, and of course in other countries around the world. Now, the effect of the definition during Israeli Party Week was quite striking. Some universities defended against it. SOAS, for example, Valerie Amos, the director of SOAS, said she wanted nothing to do with the definition, but many people thought it more convenient to go with the tide, so that in Leeds, when Craig Murray, the ex-ambassador, was due to speak, he was suddenly required at 24 hours' notice to provide a synopsis of what he was going to say in advance. At Liverpool, I can't remember his first name. Is it Mike Lavalette? Mike was asked to sign a risk assessment, which included a copy of the definition, and he refused to do so, and he spoke. So if you stand up to these things, you can maybe get away with them. The University of Central Lancashire, realizing there was to be a talk on campus on debating misconceptions of Palestine and the importance of BDS, said that we are cancelling this. It's clearly anti-Semitic, and it would be, in the light of the government's adoption of the definition, it would clearly be unlawful to allow it to take place. Well, it took place off campus. So that if there was a breaking of the law, which there wasn't, it just didn't take place on the university premises. University of Manchester imposed a chair on a meeting about Palestine. Exeter refused to allow a checkpoint to be, a mock Israeli checkpoint to be established in a place where many things had been erected previously, but suddenly they said, health and safety, we can't have this. The Charities Commission has started an inquiry into student unions which adopt a policy of boycott, divestment and sanctions, and so on. It's clear that the campuses, and to a certain lesser extent the town halls, are a site of struggle over the question of whether there is to be free expression on Israel or not. Now I'm pleased to announce that there is a small, puny Palestine lobby. We can't match the Israel lobby in size, but we recently got together. The major muscle and most of the money came from the Palestine Solidarity campaign, but we joined with them Free Speech on Israel, Jews for Justice for Palestinians, and Independent Jewish Voices. So 3 Jewish organizations have joined with them. The first thing was to seek a judicial review as to whether this statement of adopting the IHRA definition was in fact legal, or was it going beyond their powers? And we consulted an eminent human rights lawyer, Hugh Tomlinson, who told us we didn't stand an earthly of getting a judicial review on this, even if we did have the £100,000 that it cost, because the government statement has no legal effect. The government can say what they like, it doesn't change the law. What is in the law is the rights to freedom of expression, as enshrined in the Human Rights Convention. And in fact, the opinion, which I happen to have a copy of with me, says that any institution that violates those rights to freedom of expression by claiming a superior right from the government statement is itself acting unlawfully and would be subject to legal penalties. So that is where we've got to, and what we're doing with that thing, it's a piece of paper after all, actually it's 10 pieces of paper, but it's still only paper. So what we're doing is we're circulating it to all of the bodies who might want to hear. So that's what our little lobby is doing. We're sending it to MPs, lords, local authorities. It's already gone out to all the chief executives, local authorities, gone out to all vice-chancellors. It's going out to universities, students' unions, PALSOCs, Labour Party, CLPs, Momentum, churches. We've got an outreach to churches and so on. Sending it out to the media. In Europe, we sent it out to all the members of the European Parliament, etc. So there is an activity of trying to roll back this pernicious doctrine that criticism of Israel is actually anti-Semitic. One of the successes that we've had already, I say we, includes UCU, is their motion at the UCU Congress, which was, how recently? It was May, I think, which reiterated the UCU's opposition to the original definition, the EUMC definition, and reiterated it in terms of the IHRA, and said some other things besides, which Tom may be able to fill you in on. John Mann, the infamous MP, the one who went for Ken Livingstone among many other offences he has committed. Last year he circulated an early day motion to be signed by as many MPs as possible. Many MPs who should have known better signed this early day motion in support of the IHRA definition. We are now circulating to all those MPs saying you may not be aware of this opinion which says that this has no force and is indeed threatens freedom of expression. And already MPs are beginning to say we won't sign the one which he has recirculated in the new parliament. So a fight back against the allegations that support for Palestine and BDS is anti-Semitic is possible. A fight back is necessary. A fight back is happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think that there is a sense in which Jonathan has downplayed the importance of what he and others have been doing in terms of winning this legal opinion, or getting this legal opinion from Hugh Tomlinson. Because what it does is it removes one possibility, and one important possibility, that this definition that conflates anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism can become something with legal force. It's not just that that victory in law has been won there, but it's also the case that the appeal court recently, in the case of the attack made on the right of pension funds to withhold investments in companies that make themselves complicit in Israeli apartheid, and who were told by the government that this was unlawful, the appeal court has ruled that the government itself was acting unlawfully in telling them to do that, and has actually told the pension funds that they can go ahead and make their own judgments about what a moral investment can be. So I think that in that sense, Jonathan has been underestimating or underplaying the significance of what's been going on behind the scenes in that sense. But that doesn't mean to say that we've won a victory yet, because part of this assault was only a threat of legal redress against us to try and silence the Palestinian movement. Even in the absence of the reality of that legal threat, or of any change in the law that silenced the voice of Palestine, we face another problem. And the other problem is that the mere fact that the government minister in charge of higher education, and not only he, but other government ministers as well, voice their support for a definition that does this, changes the climate dramatically in which Palestine and the issue of Palestine can be debated. What it means, for instance, is that registrars and vice-chancellors and deputy vice-chancellors in universities start to think that they can interfere in what students' unions do when they decide that they want to hold a meeting on Palestine. They can start to tell academic staff who decide that they want to join with student activists to hold meetings to debate Palestine and to debate the issue of Israel's origin, that that might be something that puts the university in jeopardy by breaching the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. So what we face already, and it already exists, as Jonathan has outlined, is a shift in the climate amongst those who manage these institutions, which will make it more difficult in the future to hold those meetings. It doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that vice-chancellors or the managers of institutions will ban such meetings, will prevent them taking place at the risk of somebody being expelled from the university if they're a student, or put on disciplinary measures if they're a member of staff. What it means is a whole series of obstacles to holding the meeting will be raised, whether it's safe to hold the meeting, whether there is expensive security that has to be provided in order to ensure that there's no disruptive activity that would threaten the activities of the university. Those kinds of things. Or rooms might suddenly be unavailable. And it's in the face of that it's we, not just in this room, not just those at Marxism, but across the board, in the labour movement and in the students' movement, that we have to mount a challenge. Because if we remain silent on this question, then we will unquestionably be rolled over on it. And that's what I really want to come to at the end of the meeting. But you can see what I've been doing. I've been talking my way through to Samia getting through. And Samia has got through. Can we hear her? Speak to us. We can see her. She's not there. But she can't speak to us. So what I've suggested that we do is this. I'm going to open in a minute the meeting to questions and discussions from the floor. If Samia does manage, if the audio connection to Palestine does come through, then after the response to the last set of questions, we'll cross over to Samia, and then we'll come back for a review at the end. But before I open to questions, there's one other thing that I really want to say to you. If this is an issue that you take very seriously, then you have to take very seriously what it is that Jonathan Rosenhead has said at the beginning of his talk. And that's the significance of the way that the Jewish lobby in the UK, organised and coordinated by that smiling man that we all know so well, the new ambassador to the Court of St. James, Mark Regev, coordinating this campaign that accuses those who criticise Israel of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has become, again, the centre point around which questions of solidarity with Palestine are key. And that's why I would urge all of you who are taking this seriously to make sure that you attend the meeting that's going to be spoken to by Rob and John Rose and Brian Klug, who's an international expert on the question of anti-Semitism in the evening meeting this evening. But that's enough from me. Questions or contributions from the floor, please. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. Just a question to kick off, really. When I was a student, which is a couple of seasons ago, actually, there was an organisation called CAF, which was the Campaign for Academic Freedom. I don't know if it's still in existence, but you'll be able to tell me, and if it does, what position it's taking on this issue. But the point that I wanted to make really was that this is not just an issue affecting freedom of speech within academic institutions. By no means. What we've seen over the last few months is the way in which this conflation that you spoke about has enabled the right wing, the Blairites in the Labour Party, to go on the offensive, and the way in which actually, despite all his strengths, Corbyn has been unable to resist the pressure from the right. I come from Bradford. Our comrades have seen a decent Labour MP called Naz Shah, who is a socialist, having to retreat, humiliated, and making apologies after drawing perfectly correct conclusions about the nature of the Zionist state. So this affects anybody who is a Labour Party activist as well as an anti-Zionist. And it's really important that the campaign that you spoke about is strengthened not just for freedom of speech in student unions and by academics, but in a much broader context as well.
Well, hello. I want to talk about the effect of the BDS inside the state of Israel or in Palestine. You know that even NGOs like Position for Human Rights are afraid to talk about it. You know that this organization, this NGO, force its Palestinian workers, if they sign any agreement or being part in anything that talks about the BDS, they will be fired. Many organizations that consider to be left in Israel are so afraid because of it. So how strong is this effect? Secondly, second thing that I want to talk about it is the freedom of expression. And a month ago, an Israeli actress by the name of Einat Weizmann tried to make a play that talks about Palestinian prisoners. She collected their letters to their families, and she was not allowed to play this play. And if here in Britain you have Mark Regev, we have Miri Regev that is trying to keep people not talking about this issue. So first of all, I want, as a Palestinian, to thank you about your wonderful job. And I think things like that are more effective than anything. So thank you very much.
Oops, my name is Peter Alexander. I come from the University of Johannesburg. I was very fortunate just a few weeks ago to be able to visit Bethlehem University in Palestine. You want it on there? Okay. And it was a fascinating experience for me. I had thought that the analogy between apartheid and Israel and Palestine was based upon there being two parts to Palestine, Gaza and the West Bank. I didn't understand how separated bits and pieces of Palestine are from the totality. It even seems to me that the notion of the West Bank is really very, very misleading. The area that's controlled by the Palestinian Authority consists of small areas, so-called Area A, around 8 cities. Most of the West Bank comes under Area C, and it's controlled fully by the Israeli state. They control it in terms of security, they control it in terms of any civil activities that go on there, including building. De facto, Palestinians are prevented from building in that major area, and those are the areas where most of the Israeli settlements are being built. These settlements are massive in size, 400,000 people living in those settlements now. In a way, what's happening in Israel is far worse than anything that happened in South Africa. Palestinians are so controlled, so confined, it does feel like you're living in a prison most of the time there. But let me just make a couple of points. One is that despite the repression and oppression of the Israeli government, people are continuing to fight daily. People coming out of the so-called refugee camps in places like Bethlehem and fighting the Israeli state, even if it's only at the level of stones and so on. There's a continuing struggle with which we can act in solidarity. The second thing is my own visit there was for an academic conference, but it was in reality also a solidarity visit. And those solidarity visits were being encouraged by all of the people that I met. So I think that if you have concerns about visiting Palestine, because maybe you're breaking some kind of boycott, you need to distinguish between Palestine and Israel. There should be, and quite properly, a boycott of going to Israel. That doesn't mean to say you can't go to Palestine and demonstrate your solidarity and return to Britain or elsewhere explaining what's happening in that particular part of the world, which I think is horrific, but I do think that we can begin to win the fight over that particular issue.
Loads of hands have gone up. I'm not stopping the discussion at all, but we've finally got through to Samia, so I'm told. So before the link breaks again, I think we should go to her. Welcome, Samia.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can.
Ah, finally. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this platform. As Tom has explained earlier, I will discuss 3 main issues in particular. The first one basically relates to the importance of BDS for us as Palestinians living in Palestine, being under occupation, under colonization. What is the meaning of all these activities that people engage in internationally, be it in London or Canada or South Korea or Latin America? How does it impact our lives? The other issue that I will discuss is through explaining the importance of these campaigns, just touch upon them. So what are these campaigns around the world? Because I'm sure you know quite a lot about the campaigns taking place in the UK. But really, it's the collective work around the world that makes a difference. Finally, I will also consider briefly the reaction of the Israeli government to all these activities and what does that mean to a resistance movement. Actually, I prepared something written because it's easier probably to read something than just to discuss because of the time limitations. So I will start by saying in May 15th, 2017, that date actually marked the 69th anniversary of the 1948 Nakba, or the mass expulsion of the Palestinians from their homeland. Between 1947 and 1949, Zionists paramilitaries and subsequently Israeli forces made nearly 1 million Palestinians into refugees to establish a Jewish majority state in Palestine. The 1 million actually account for more than 70% of the Palestinians. So the vast majority of the Palestinians were actually ethnic cleansed from Palestine. The Palestinian Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions National Committee has been calling on people of consciousness around the world to further intensify BDS, to end academic, cultural, sports, military, and economic links of complicity with Israel regimes of occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid. This, for us as Palestinians, is the most effective means of standing with the Palestinian people in pursuing our inherent and UN stipulated rights and non-violently resisting the ongoing intensifying Nakba. The Israeli regime is still ruthlessly pursuing the one constant strategy of its settler colonial project, the continued colonization of as much Palestinian land and water resources as possible, and the gradual ethnic cleansing of as many Palestinians as practical without evoking international sanctions. Now, this over the years has taken different forms. At the moment, for example, to give you an idea, there is an active ethnic cleansing process in the Jordan Valley. What does that mean? It means that people are giving orders to evacuate certain areas, certain territory that they have lived in for the past thousands of years. And since Bedouins, who account for nearly 2% of the Palestinian population who live in the Jordan Valley, do not have deeds for the land because this has been their land for thousands of years. They are more easily ethnically cleansed from their territory, and they're pushed into different territory that doesn't actually suit their way of living at all. This also applies to communities, small communities in the south of the West Bank, in the Hebron area. Water confiscation. Israel has been innovative in water technology and water confiscation. Israel doesn't anymore put its hands on springs. It actually digs in order to channel water from the land underneath the wells. So it doesn't actually physically go and put its hands on springs and wells anymore. The water doesn't basically get to the spring or the well. And this puts us, I mean, the past few days we had a heat wave. And of course the settlements need water, you know, for swimming pools, refreshing themselves. And hence we didn't have drinking water in the cities and villages around the West Bank because the settlements, you know, people in the settlements, Israelis, are feeling very hot and warm. So we can't drink as a result. Now, over the years, I mean, these are just examples of, you know, how colonialism basically dictates the most important aspects in your life, as well as the most trivial. And that's why colonialism, in a way, controls your, basically enslaves you somehow. You have no control over your actions, you have no control over your destiny. And that's what we're trying to basically resist. Very much of the time, people know quite a lot about movement restrictions, checkpoints, curfews, closures, and so on. And these these are very visible, and you know, we can count them, we can give them lengths of time, and so on. But really, the essence of colonialism is the collection of the policies that undermine your capacity to live freely in every way. And people here feel it in every trivial and major aspects of their lives. Now, following in the footsteps of all previous Israeli governments, the current far-right Israeli government, the most openly racist in Israel's history, actually, they're very proud of their racism, is heeding the words of the Zionist leader, Ze'ev Jabotinsky, who wrote in 1923, and I'm quoting, "Every native population in the world resists colonialists as long as it has the slightest hope of being able to rid itself of the danger of being colonized." This is Jabotinsky. "Zionist colonization must either stop or else proceed regardless of the native population, which means that it can proceed and develop only under the protection of a power that is independent of the native population, behind an iron wall, which the native population cannot breach." End of quote. 69 years after the systematic, premeditated uprooting and dispossession of the most of the indigenous Palestinian Arabs from the land of Palestine at the hands of Zionist gangs, and later the State of Israel, the Nakba is not over. Israel is intent on building its iron wall in Palestinian minds and not just our lands. Through its illegal settlements and concrete walls in the occupied Palestinian territory, its genocidal siege of over 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, its denial of the Palestinian refugee rights to return, its racist laws and policies against Palestinians inside Israel, its escalating violent ethnic cleansing in Jerusalem, Jordan Valley, and the Nakba. It is sparing no brutality in its relentless, desperate attempts to sear into our consciousness the futility of resistance and the vainness of hope. The mass hunger strike, which ended 2 weeks ago by over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, and the grassroots support that it triggered, gives us hope. The growing support for BDS among international trade unions, including the most recent adoption by the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions, representing nearly 1 million workers that's what they adopted, international economic, cultural, and academic boycott of Israel to achieve comprehensive Palestinian right, that gives us hope. The fact that none of the 26 Oscar nominees offered free trip by the Israeli government, none of them accepted this propaganda gift, and that 6 out of 11 National Football League players turned down a similar Israeli offer, that gives us hope. On June 27th, the International Cooperation Committee of the Spanish Congress unanimously approved a motion put forward by a parliamentary group supporting the legitimate defense of human rights. The motion calls on the Spanish government to recognize and defend the right of human rights activists from Palestine, Israel, and other countries to engage in legal and peaceful activities protected by the right of freedom of speech and assembly, such as the right to promote BDS. The BDS movement has, over the past decade or so, succeeded in sharply raising the price of corporate complicity with Israel. It has compelled companies of the size of Orange and Veolia to end their complicity, and pushed global giant companies like G4S to begin exiting the Israeli market. Churches, city councils, and thousands around the world have pledged to boycott Hewlett Packard, for example, for its deep complicity in Israel's occupation. This also gives us great hope. The Barcelona municipality decision to end complicity with Israel's occupation coming on the heels of tens of local councils in the Spanish state declaring themselves Israeli apartheid-free zones gives us also hope. The divestment by some of the largest mainline churches in the US, including the United Methodist Church and other churches in the US, also have provided us with huge support for BDS. The spread of remarkably effective BDS campaigns from South Africa to South Korea, from Egypt to Chile, and from the UK to the US has been significant for sustaining our resistance to colonization. So all these, basically, all these examples, activities, campaigns around the world, they provide us with what it actually takes for us to continue with resisting colonization. It is extremely important for our students, for example, as a teacher, for them to know that there is sort of a joint international work, not just solidarity, moral solidarity, but actually effective solidarity in supporting their struggle against colonization. So your work in supporting BDS is not just about morally supporting the Palestinians, it's actually effectively making a lot of difference on the ground in terms of our resistance. It actually stimulates our resistance on the ground. There is also BDS campaigns that are local. So Palestinians boycott Israeli goods and commodities. And this is actually very unlike South Africa. In South Africa, the black South Africans did not boycott white businesses and so on. Here in Palestine, we do boycott Israeli products and commodities. And this is because Israel has attempted to erode our productive sectors as a mechanism to undermine our political and social cohesion. So by undermining our basically manufacturing, agriculture, technology, Israel has hit at the core of Palestinian communities. And we are trying to resist that by boycotting Israeli goods and commodities. So campaigns around the world also, in a way, encourage Palestinians who do not have as many choices as you do to boycott Israeli goods and commodities. Now, we know we're doing good work because the Israeli government is taking our resistance very seriously, yours and ours. And we know that by the laws passed in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset. We know that by this recent, actually, Israeli new innovation in terms of fighting BDS. The Israeli Minister of Education, Naftali Bennett, is promoting a new ethics code. And this ethics code would prohibit Israeli university professors from expressing any political opinions. Now, the new code would also forbid professors to call for or participate in any academic boycott of Israel or even its settlement colleges. Now, the person who has developed this new ethics code is Asa Kasher, his name. He's a professor at Tel Aviv University, who has been also in charge of authoring the ethics code for the Israeli military since the mid-90s. This person is notorious for his work. He has defended Israel's attacks on the Gaza Strip, and here I'm quoting him saying that the number of casualties, and the casualties here is the 2,200 Palestinians who were killed in the Gaza Strip in 2014. And this person Okay, 1 minute left. This person he says that the number of casualties of the Palestinians is irrelevant. It does not really speak of omissions or any wrongdoing. And this is the person drafting the ethics code for Israeli academics and how to manage their political speech. I mean, in short, in the half minute left for me, I want to again reiterate the importance of international solidarity in the BDS movement. As I said, it sustains our resistance. It creates real impact on Israel, and we know that by Israel's reaction. And we know that our work in BDS is long-term. We know that this resistance movement will not take a few years. It's really long-term. And for us to achieve just peace, and that's what we are after, liberation and just peace, we have to work together here as Palestinians, but also as conscientious individuals and groups around the world. And thank you.
Thank you to Samia. Samia has been an inspiration to those of us in the University and Colleges Union and into the British Committee for the Universities of Palestine for many years. It has been a bit of a disrupted discussion because of the connection, but I hope that Samia can stay with us and hear some of the rest of the discussion that's been taking place. And I can remember a few of the hands that went up. They're going to have to go up again. There was one hand right at the back over there, if you could come forward. And there was somebody else there, and sorry, there too. So that's the first three. And then there from Leeds, and the woman in front who I don't know, I'm afraid.
I'm Dara from the Manchester district, and I'm Dara from the Manchester district, and I just wanted to share a little something that in the University of Manchester, our Swiss groups meeting on Palestine and the BDS campaign earlier this year was cancelled an hour before it was supposed to go ahead by the Students' Union because they argued it may be anti-Semitic, despite the fact that our speaker was Jewish, and also despite the fact that the NUS is signing of a pro-BDS statement. Our union has shamefully done nothing to act on it. Instead, they've taken steps to stop us having BDS meetings, but we still had a meeting larger than we were expecting just across the road in a bar, so it all went grand.
The next one, because the comrades come to the front.
My name is Sabir Segal. I come from a Jewish family. And when I was growing up, Israel was considered a progressive state, even a socialist state. Idealistic young people would spend a year in a kibbutz. Today, idealistic young people don't spend a year in a kibbutz. They spend time, a year, whatever, in a Palestinian village. And that is a sign of the enormous change that has taken place in the last, 20 odd years. And I think the BDS movement is of particular importance in strengthening the Palestinian resistance, as Samia said. And comparison is often made with South Africa. Now, this is valid up to a point, but I think there is... The term apartheid can be misleading. I think if you use the term apartheid in relation to Palestinians living in Israel, it is valid. If you look at the situation of Palestinians in the occupied territories, in the refugee camps, Israel is worse than apartheid South Africa. In South Africa, the black working class, the majority of them, at least they were working, they were super exploited, but they were part of the society. The Zionist movement, the Israeli state, has always attempted to exclude the Palestinians. And if not, I think if not for the international solidarity movement, it is quite likely that the Israeli state would have completed the work they did with the Nakba in 1948. So all of us who are involved in BDS movement, let's intensify our efforts. Those who are not involved in BDS, get involved.
My name is Alan Gibson. I'm with the National Executive of the National Union of Students. I think it's absolutely... Yeah, NUJ, yes. Oh, sorry. The National Union of Journalists. I'm really sorry about that. Thank you. Excuse me. I think it's absolutely imperative on every union member, no matter what union you're in, to not only get a motion through supporting the BDS movement, but to get motions through condemning the definition, the conflation of anti-Semitism with attacks on Zionism. It's absolutely imperative that we do that. And certainly we're going to try and do that in the National Union of Journalists at our conference next April. I should say, however, that the chances of us winning it are very, very low. Now, you would think that a union that puts freedom of expression very, very high up on its agenda would be absolutely only too pleased to support a motion like this. But on every attempt that we've tried to get a BDS motion through our union, it has been beaten back by the NEC, and they've always used the weapon of the BBC. They've got our members at the BBC to get up and say that if you pass this motion, our members working in the Middle East will be in danger, they will be in danger of their lives, and so on and so forth. And on the basis of that, and they always get a stooge Palestinian trade unionist to come along and say, please don't pass this motion on the BDS, we don't want you to do this, and so on and so forth. And on every attempt that we've tried to actually take these people on, they've beaten us back. We shall truly do our utmost to win it this year, but we need help, basically. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
I have to ask all the speakers now to restrict their comments to a minute and a half, because otherwise we're not going to get through all this.
Thank you very much. My name is Frank Stowe, and I'm from Norwich SWP, and also chairman of Palestine Solidarity. I wanted to just share with you the experiences we've had where we, ever since Castle 8, we have done a Palestine supper jointly between Norwich PSC, Norwich Stop the War, and the Nisa Sisters, which is a group of Muslim ladies who prepare the food for the supper, and it's been an event which has been well received through the years. This year we were booked at the Methodists, as we were the last 2 years, and the day before the supper was due to take place, they cancelled our booking. Fortunately, we had friends in the nature of the Norwich Quakers, and they said, come here. So we went there, and we had probably the best supper that we've had in all the time that we've been doing it. There was a buzz about the place, and there was a defiance of the Board of Deputies who'd caused the cancellation of the original venue. But this does illustrate what is happening around the UK and in universities. I think the legal opinion that we've now got is one that should be publicised very widely. Lastly, we had Andrew Murray speak recently at the steering committee of National Stop the War, and he said the right has been knocked back, but we shall still get trouble in the Labour Party from the Zionists. That's something that we should take as a warning. Thank you.
I just wanted to give another example of how the suppression of support for Palestinian human rights is being played out on our campuses. I'm a UCU trade union rep at Leeds University. I was recently a caseworker for a member of academic staff who on his door had the commitment by UK scholars to human rights in Palestine. There's a movement for academics to sign that. It's basically a commitment to not have links with Israeli institutions. A student had put pressure on him to remove the poster because it offended him. The academic held his ground and argued patiently and didn't remove it. Shortly afterwards, the university senior management received a legal threat from an Israeli lobby organisation. Sorry, not Israeli, a Zionist lobby organisation, and the member was called to visit senior management, and I was his rep. The case went very well, and academic freedom was upheld, and he was permitted to keep the poster on his door. However, what I want to say is how important it is for people to be as dogged as our comrades here at the front are in these campaigns, because very shortly after that, the new definition of anti-Semitism was adopted by the government, and I do feel had we been going into that meeting after that new definition had been adopted, our management approach may have been different, and the outcome may have been different. And as an add-on to that, we've had a local strike last week at Leeds University. I'll be very quick now. And I had a poster on my own door advertising the strike. We had a strike on a high-profile open day, and my manager in my department, my head of school, has removed that poster. And I feel confident, because we won the commitment to academic freedom over the previous issue, it does feed into other arguments about academic freedom, and I'm going to take that forward.
Just one short example from Germany. A student group in the University of Mainz, they invited a lecturer from South Africa, a black lecturer at Cape Town. He lectures sociology. And they got a letter just one day before saying, oh, is that anti-Semitic and so on, so because he supports BDS and so on. So the venue was cancelled, and we had to move to another place. I mean, this is an example of, it's the same all over the place.
Hi, I'm Merfa Suleiman. I'm a SWP member and Palestine Solidarity campaign in the West Midlands. Just I'll say a few things about what we started with the campaign against Veolia. We won that. Follow up with the G4S. We won that. There's a lot of struggle that we won, and the recent attack on the BDS movement. I mean, yesterday, 2 days actually, Thursday and Friday, we blocked the Albit. I mean, this is for Palestine. We blocked the Albit drone factory in Shenstone near Birmingham for 2 days. The factory shut. That's a victory. We've been doing that, and it's quite successful. And the last thing, Palestine Solidarity campaign. Yay! Thank you. The last thing that I don't know if people are aware that Palestine Solidarity Campaign won the court, High Court. The government acted unlawfully by restricting the ethics of boycotting of Israel. The High Court. I mean, this is something we need to take it forward. That actually. The High Court actually support the BDS, basically. So, we need to take that battle back against the new surge of movement from the Zionist lobby against the BDS. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Vian, I'm a member of the WRP. I lived on a small island in Orkney for many years, and a few of us set up Orkney Friends of Palestine. Now I'm speaking on a practical level. We used to sell Palestinian goods and send the money, obviously, to Palestine. We collected enough money to send a young Palestinian man to university, and I've kept in touch with people. It's still going strong, that organisation, Friends of Palestine. It's still going very strong. They've also had a Palestinian dance troupe come to that small island, 4 miles long by a mile wide. So I'm pleased to say it's really going strong. And it's just on a personal level, that is. And I don't know what else to say, really.
I just wanted to talk about why this fight is so important, because actually the fight for Palestinian rights is a fight against racism. Zionism is a political idea. You can be Zionist and not Jewish. All American presidents, actually, until not in the 1800s, were Zionists. They are Zionists and they haven't been Jewish. And it's absolutely crucial that we fight this. The fact that it's even happened in the Labour Party is a sign of the success of the Palestinian movement in this country. What we have to do, we're not the only people who do this. Obviously, Jewish people in this room and Jewish people in Israel, Palestine actually fight this. It's not an accident that Marek Edelman, if you can pick up his book, a brilliant book, he survived the Warsaw Uprising and he wrote a brilliant book about it. He stands in courts with Palestinians, defending them and describing how what is happening to them happened to him. And that's why we're in a situation, actually, there is a bigger polarisation, there is an increase in racism, and actually there is an increase in anti-Semitism. It's not the same as Islamophobia at all. But we have to fight this because we want to fight real racism, real anti-Semitism, real racism together.
We're going to have to draw the meeting to a close fairly soon, but we will have a reply from Jonathan Rosenhead in a minute. But first of all, there's an announcement to be made.
Can you hear me? Yes. Hi, my name's Tom Kay. I'm a member of Haringey SWP branch. I'm a member of the editorial board of the Socialist Review, and I'm a proud anti-Zionist Jew. Really, I'm here to talk about the event and Marxism Festival, and I think the opportunity that it's given us, and then also to ask for some money. When I first came to London 3 years ago, I arrived as the massive movement erupted on the streets of Britain in response to Operation Protective Edge. People will remember demonstration after demonstration over a 3-week period. Of hundreds of thousands of people marching against the horrors we saw. And, those demos were fantastic, weren't they? Muslim women leading them, people of all faiths, of no faith, coming together and saying not in our name. And, since then, we saw a whole series of successes around the BDS movement, and then the response which has been highlighted so brilliantly in this meeting. And Marxism Festival is a place for people to come together and discuss and debate ideas, so we have political clarity, but also to talk about how we can launch campaigns like the one that we will clearly need in universities and elsewhere in response to the IHRA definition and so on. But unfortunately, Marxism costs a hell of a lot of money. If people don't know, just hiring the rooms at Marxism this year has cost £60,000. The creche which we run so that it's as accessible to people as possible costs £6,500, and flying speakers from around the world in to speak to people costs an additional £6,000. Now, people may know that we did a collection on Thursday. A large section of that money went to the campaigns that spoke at the opening rally. We want to do another collection to make sure that next year at Marxism, we can keep Marxism at the price we do have it, which is as cheap as it can possibly done. And in order to do that, we've got to ask people to dig deep, and we want to make it as quick and as quiet a donation as possible, which means any notes you have, obviously make less noise. I just want to thank everyone for coming, and finally just to say, free! That was terrible. One more. Free! Thank you, comrades.
Before the meeting finishes, I want to ask Jonathan Rosenhead to say a few words.
Okay, very quickly, thanks for all the very interesting points that were made. Just a very few very short comments. Somebody mentioned the campaign for academic freedom and democracy and wondered whether it still existed. And I think it folded into Liberty quite some time ago. And our little consortium that's trying to make a Palestine lobby has been to meet Liberty and informed them about the definition. They wanted to supply them with a full list of all the information about what happened in Israeli Apartheid Week. So we're hopeful that Liberty will be taking up this issue soon. Secondly, Nash Shah was mentioned from Bradford. Of course, it was in defending Nashar that Ken Livingstone got into trouble with his statement on radio interview, and he actually had the effrontery to use the words Hitler and Zionism in the same sentence, although they were perfectly logical, which was that the Zionists and the Hitler regime had not conspired, but agreed together to get some Jews out of Germany into Israel, into Palestine, as it then was, at a price. I was one of the witnesses for Ken at his tribunal in front of the Labour Party. All the witnesses were Jewish, and I'd like to think that was part of the reason that he was merely had his suspension extended, but they couldn't find a reasonable way of saying he'd been guilty of anti-Semitism. Somebody talked about the way in which, I think it was Samia said, how the Palestinians are supporting boycott. Well, there are a brave group of people in Israel who do that too. They call themselves Boycott from Within. One of their members, Ronnie Barkan, has been speaking at an event that I've been at as well this morning, Pal Expo, which is the biggest Palestinian event in Europe ever, I think. And Ronnie is one of the wonderful, resolute Israeli agitators and partisans who work for freedom and liberation of the Palestinians. Lastly, there was the case of our comrade who put up the poster on his rooms at Leeds. That's James Dickens. I'm glad to say he is a member of BRIC Up, and BRIC Up is a very fine organisation. There is another very fine organisation which I'm a member of, Free Speech on Israel, which is doing most of the campaign work about trying to keep freedom of expression possible. I have a few of these leaflets available. If people want to know more about Free Speech on Israel, please come and get one from me. Thank you very much.
Samia, I don't think we have time to call you back. We don't have time to call you back, I'm afraid.
Sorry?
We do not have time to call you back. We have to finish the meeting.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The very last thing that I want to say is this, and it is this, and it's important, including for those of you who are leaving the room. There is going to be a campaign in the autumn and in the spring, and it is going to start on the campuses in the universities. So if you are an employee of a university and a member of the University and Colleges Union, or a member of Unison, or any other trade union on the campus, or if you are a student studying now, or somebody who's going to become a student next year and you're interested in this, we will be contacting you about that campaign to get involved. Finally, don't forget, at 7 o'clock tonight, the meeting on anti-Semitism. I urge everybody to go to that.